Hello and welcome to our very first in-person Deprogrammed interview. I am here with my friend Adam Coleman, who is known as Wrong Speak. You may know him as Wrong Speak on X. He is the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, and he has a new book out. It's called The Children We Left Behind, and I'm so grateful to have him here today, not only because this is the first time I've met you in person, this trip of yours. And so I was shocked. I thought we had already met. And I'm also very grateful to have him because without you, I don't know if we would have figured out the tech today.
We would have figured it out. But no, I appreciate you inviting me into your home and hanging out with yourself and your lovely husband as well.
Yeah.
And this house is like going back in time.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
Eventually, I want it to feel like when people are over that each room maybe is a different time period. I didn't even tell you about those plans. So,
Oh, man.
But Adam, okay. Like I said, I consider you a friend, even though we had not met in person until now, which shocked me. You are, let me just get this out of the way before we talk about your book.
Mm-hmm.
You are, a sincere compliment, one of the busiest and most accomplished people that I know. And I know I don't see every post and everything that you're up to, but when I see something, it's always working on personal fitness, taking trips with a beautiful wife, talking about how in love you are with your wife, talking about the projects you're doing. You're writing for numerous publications now.
Mm-hmm.
Just wrote your second book. Have your own publishing company. How do you balance all this?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough, if I'm honest. I think hard work is something that I got from my mom. My mom's a hustler, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
She was always doing something. So I never grew up thinking being lazy was a good thing. I was always someone like if I had a job, I worked really hard at it. I took pride in what I was doing. If I no longer took pride in it, I didn't want to be there anymore. Right. So that was basically my position. I was always like passionate about working as hard as I possibly can in anything that I'm doing. And especially demonstrating that for my son. I remember, like teenagers, they have their moments in the pandemic and all these things. But I explicitly told him, you can't turn off and on hard work. You just have to do it all the time. And I'm very proud of him because he's 19. And I watched him, because he works at a restaurant, I watched this boy just like buzz around that restaurant, taking pride in everything that he did. And so I think the hard work is something that is just, I need to accomplish these things. These are things I have to do. And I'm trying to figure out how much time to be efficient to do these things. And especially when it comes to like writing and things like that, you need to have clarity of mind. So having your own space, I know when I write the best, like as far as like the time of the day, location where I write the best. Also, sometimes I write really well under a lot of pressure. So I've had it where
I'm looking at my husband because he said, it seems to me you almost need pressure sometimes.
Sometimes.
You write really well under pressure?
Yeah. There was one time I was about to leave to go to Moms for Liberty, to their conference in Philadelphia. I was about to drive there. And someone from the New York Post was like, hey, can you write something? I'm like, when do you need it by? They're like, noon. And I was like, I'm getting ready to leave. So normally, especially then, it would normally take me like 2.5 hours to I did it in 45 minutes. Like I just belted something out because the pressure was on. I needed to complete it. And it turned out well, got a good response. So stuff like that has happened. Or if I'm like super, super annoyed, I write really well. I can write really fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So do you primarily, I was thinking a lot about labels recently. And I noticed that I kind of, my story, I came out of the woke left, and in doing so, I've been very hesitant to put labels on myself, but other people put all kinds of labels on me.
Yeah.
And I do know there are some that I don't like. I don't like activists, for example. I never have since I left the woke left. do you consider yourself, what labels do you primarily consider yourself? Like you're a writer?
Well, political affiliation,
Right.
independent.
Right.
Um, so I always find it interesting what people call me because, for example, I get like conservative or black conservative.
Hmm.
I don't think I've ever referred to myself as that
Right.
publicly. So it's just interesting when people say that because I'm pretty liberal on certain things, and other things I'm pretty conservative on. So it just really depends on what it is. I'm very moderate on 90+% of the issues. Um, I have very strong opinions on certain things. I would say, especially like being a former Democrat, the one position that I've completely changed was the pro-life position. I used to be pro-choice. Now I'm 100% radically pro-life.
What does radically pro-life mean?
No exemptions.
Yeah. Well, and that's the one policy position you can think of that you've changed.
That's extreme.
Right. Okay. That's
Like
extreme.
extreme as in where I was coming from. Because a lot of people are like, I'm pro-life, but under certain exemptions, I can understand. For me personally, I understand politically, it's not something that will work because for various reasons. But for me personally, if I was king of for the day and you told me which position on this, I would be like, no exemptions.
Yeah.
Life is life.
Yeah.
You shouldn't punish a child for the way that they were conceived. So no exemptions.
What do you think is behind the phenomenon of people calling you a black conservative?
I mean, it's not like it's out of nowhere. I mean, I'm well aware that I write for center right publications, right? So they're going to presume that I'm conservative, or I was just at the Blaze, a conservative network. I just appeared on there, so I understand because of my affiliation. But I do feel like the media environment, there's not a whole lot of room for a moderate viewpoint coming from left-leaning outlets. It's very, very dogmatic. Whereas I've seen feminists show up on right-leaning networks because they're very strong on the trans issue, right?
Yes.
And so they're like, all right, you're a feminist and we complain about you with other things, but you know what? On this issue, we'll take you on and we'll give you a platform to say whatever you want to say.
Yes.
So that there's more freedom to express an alternate viewpoint or alternative viewpoint on the political right in the media environment than on the political left.
Yep.
Even in independent media, there's very, very few. Like the only person I can think of is Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore is someone who's had people who are on the political right and political left, and he's fine with that. Or even Bill Maher. Bill Maher is someone who sits down and talks with conservatives, right? And he disagrees with them to their face, but he'll talk to them. So, these types of things, our media environment has become very polarizing in that way, but even more so on the left.
Mm-hmm. What do you think led you? What compelled you to start writing this book? Again, it's called The Children That We Left Behind.
The big thing was, especially writing for the New York Post, there were multiple times where I would see an event that would occur, like mass shootings, for example. One of the articles that I wrote about was the Uvalde shooting, and learning about how the young man had mental issues, but it got dramatically worse when the pandemic happened and he couldn't see his father. So I was talking about the impact of children not having access to their fathers, and I was being empathetic while not absolving him of what he did. What he did was heinous, but just highlighting this is how critical fathers are to children. And that was like a repeat thing that would come up for these different shooters. A Colorado shooter, he came from his parents. I think his father was like in porn at one point, and I think there was drug issues between probably both of them. His grandparents were raising him at one point, so it was just a mess. And granted, he was an adult by the time that happened. The shooting happened, But you just saw like there's an origin for this. Even like the drug issue when it comes to San Francisco, the homelessness issue is linked with drug addiction. Most of these drug addicts have probably been taking some sort of drug or substance since they were teenagers. And so the question is, why would a teenager be consistently taking this? And it's because they're trying to cope. Rebellious kids do it once in a while. Kids who have severe issues at home do it all the time. That is how they cope with whatever's going on. A good friend of mine, who's no longer with us, he went into rehab at the age of 16 for alcoholism. And because he was dealing with stuff at home, and he actually died of an accidental overdose. And the dealers the dealers were prosecuted because of giving him laced drugs.
Wow.
Yeah.
16 to already be battling an addiction.
Yeah. And he died, I want to say he was 31 when he died. So I didn't realize that he was using either. So it was a shock to me. So, I'm just seeing that the constant link is tumultuous, broken families. And also my story. Granted, I never got into drugs or crime or anything like that, but I was very much so vulnerable. I didn't live in a high crime area at pivotal points in my life to get caught up in it. But I suffered a lot. I struggled with low self-esteem, depression, suicidal ideation. At the age of 8, I went to a mental hospital. I was there for 3 months. And after that, my demeanor and how I expressed myself was completely different. Even my mom acknowledges that before going in and after I was different. So, how that affected me for decades. And I'm not the only one who's experienced stuff like that. Maybe not everybody's gone to a mental hospital, but they're struggling. They're feeling like they're being rejected. They're feeling like they have no one to turn to, or that the man who helped to bring them into this world is disconnected from them. I talk about in the book, like my father was a biological stranger. Like I don't really know anything about my father. For many years, I didn't even know fully what his first name was. I would mix up his first name. So, I don't know his immigrant story coming from Trinidad. Like I don't know really much of anything about my father. He was always a stranger. So.
Do you, and I haven't been able to read the book yet. You just gave me this a couple days ago, but I want to read it with the Deprogrammed book club.
Yeah.
Which I think would be great. But you share a lot of personal stories in here. We have a friend in common who told me she cried constantly reading this, like you, very vulnerable in here.
Yeah.
When you were a child, were you cognizant of the impact, like the absence of your father was having, or was that something that you developed later? Being aware that like there's something missing here.
I would say that there were key moments where my father's absence was noticeable.
Yeah.
So like being in the hospital, only seeing my mother and my sister come and visit me, that was noticeable. Being in Boy Scouts and all the fathers are there with their sons. My father's not there. I'm the only one who doesn't. That's noticeable. Being in Little League, all the families in the stands, either the fathers are coaching or in the stands watching their sons. My father's never there. And sometimes my mom would be there, but, sometimes she wasn't because she was working a lot and had to take care of 2 kids. So, those were definitely moments that I noticed as a kid. As I became an adult, especially going through therapy and things like that, I realized the sense of fear of rejection, how it made me desperate, how it affected my relationships, accepting people who were very flawed but just gave me attention. So I just, clinged on to them. Yes. Not having a whole lot of standards because of it as well. So these things affected my life in various ways, especially having low self-esteem, because when I would mess up as a kid, I didn't have a man to say like, it's okay, it's normal. Whereas like for my son, when he had his, first little girlfriend and she broke up with him, I was able to go and talk to him and say, it's okay. This is normal. I didn't have that. So I thought something was wrong with me. That's what a lot of kids do. They think something's wrong with them. And especially when mistakes happen over and over, which kids make mistakes, they think that something is wrong with them. There's no, especially for a young man, there's no adult male figure saying, this is perfectly normal and there's nothing wrong with you. And let me talk about the areas where you're exceptional.
Or even having a male role model close to them to emulate.
Yeah.
Just in everyday, day-to-day kind of life, learning what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Having that absence. How did becoming a father change you?
In many ways, it saved my life. My son gave me a purpose that I didn't know I needed at the time. It became not about me, but about him. So if I made certain risks, it was because I was wanting it to be an opportunity so I can make more money, so I can take care of my son, or something of that nature. I would say that I matured faster because of it. I had my son at 21, which is not incredibly young, but it's not that old. And especially for me, I was still trying to figure out how to be a man, which, I tell people all the time, I didn't become a man until I was about 33.
Wow. What do you mean by that?
Where I felt like I started having things together, where my confidence was there, or coming together, where I felt secure. I guess that's the best way of putting it, where I started feeling secure about myself as a man. But until then, I was very much so insecure.
Yeah.
But my son means a lot. He means a lot to me. He gave me a reason to live, even more so, especially, battling suicidal ideation, and wondering if I can actually do this, but I knew that I wanted to not be my father. That was like the first thought I had when he was born. I can't be my father. So everything I did was to be involved in his life. And I tried to be the father that I thought I would have wanted when I was a kid. So my relationship with him has been about honesty and communication. I talk to him. So if he messed up, I talk to him. I might yell at him depending on what's going on, but I primarily would talk to him and tell him I expect more from him, right? And I would give him grace, and talk to him some more. If I had to yell at him, I would explain why I'm yelling at him. And I tried not to take out my frustration out on him. And I'm not perfect. I've done that, but I would always go back and apologize to him and say that I shouldn't have done that. Right. So I always treated him with respect, and in return, he's always respected me. So he's always been extremely well behaved. I haven't had to put my hands on him because I chose not to do that as a parenting style. I was spanked. A lot of people are spanked when they're younger, but I chose not to do that with him. The moments where someone would spank him, I would actually go and talk to him. And I made sure, like, my mother didn't spank him either. Like, I don't do that. We talk. His mother didn't spank him. We always talk to him. And he well-behaved, well-disciplined kid.
Are you familiar with, recently there was a story that was going around. It was about an actor who just passed away. And I'm blanking on the actor, but you're making me think of it. He was talking about not having a father.
Gene Hackman.
It was Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
Right. Did you see that story? And what did you think about that in terms of the wounds that don't heal? Do they heal, or is it dependent on the person? And
there's always a scab at the very least. I've made it to a point where I can talk about these things and usually not tear up and not feel some sort of negative emotion. But it's because I've confronted it head first, and the repetitious nature of talking about it is something where I'm not afraid of it, and it doesn't negatively affect me. So I don't know him personally. I don't know if he talked about it. Usually, older generation, they tend to just like stuff in their feelings, what they were going through. But for me, I need to resolve things. Like I need to talk about it, because I did spend time, especially when I was younger, not communicating. And actually, when I first went to a therapist was when I was having panic attacks at work. And I thought I was going to go to the therapist and just talk about like my job. And then all this stuff started coming out about my childhood. And for like, I think it was like the first month, I went 3 times a week, and I was just bawling, crying every time, because it was like all these things I didn't resolve. I just hid. And it was the first time I felt like comfortable talking to someone about it. And the therapist I had was very much so nurturing. It was exactly what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm going to go back to the book for a second. The subtitle of your book is How Western Culture Rationalizes Family Separation and Ignores the Pain of Child Neglect. We're living in what many would call a very woke time, a time that is overly, if anything, overly empathetic, almost toxically, some people call it toxically empathetic, where it's all about the feels, it's all about sometimes weaponizing empathy, things like that. So if that's the case, how in that kind of culture, in that kind of society that we're in now, how is it that we are ignoring the pain of child neglect or ignoring the pain of family separation?
Well, obviously, like every family is a little bit different, but there are aspects of our culture where it is very much so adult driven. It is very much so selfish. Their choices that they're making, they rationalize their choices despite knowing that it's going to harm their kids. But we'll throw them into therapy and they'll be fine. Like it's always, they'll be fine at the end of the day. Using phrases like, if I'm happy, my children will be happy. Yes. That's a rationalization of what's about to come. They know that chasing their happiness, whatever happiness they think is going to be out there, especially stemming from some sort of divorce, chasing that is going to impact their kid. But if I feel better by knowing, once I'm happy, they'll be happy, then it's okay, right? And the only reason you would rationalize something is if you know that without rationalizing it, it's not good, right? You have to make all types of excuses, So it's like being on a diet, but knowing if you have that ice cream, it's not good. And we're like, well, I've been good lately. You're rationalizing what you're about to do.
Yes.
You're not supposed to have it. And it's the same thing. We have adults who get to act like children, and they expect the kids to respond like adults.
Yes. I was going to say, I think some of this empathy, a lot of it is for show. But I think you phrased it better. It's what I'm hearing. The word that comes to mind when I hear you saying this is selfishness. There's a lot of selfishness and narcissism.
Yeah.
That's just sort of bled into our culture.
I mean, we are encouraged to focus on the individual, which makes sense. I talk about in my first book the importance of individualism, right? But just like anything, you can do it too much. You can do it too often. And there has to be a balance, right? So when I'm using individualism, I'm doing it in comparison to collectivism.
Right.
Right. And maybe there are moments where collectivism is beneficial, right? But there's a balance with it. But I do tend to think that the individual, focusing on individualism, is important versus collectivism. But with that being stated, I do think that once you become a parent, you as an individual gets downgraded, because the entire point is that you're supposed to sacrifice for children.
Yes. This is a problem. I butt up against this problem all the time we don't have enough words for things like the Greeks. Like, how many words do they have for love?
Yeah.
Because we use that word individualism to, I think, represent two very different things. One as a system of governance or of viewing people, as opposed to collectivism. But then there's this other kind of individualism that you're talking about, which can lend itself to narcissism or selfishness.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think that's not what being a parent is. It's not
No.
about, me, the individual. At that point, I think there are a lot of parents who unfortunately view their children, if they view them as anything at all, if they're even in their lives, view them as like an extension of themselves.
Yes.
Sort of.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Yeah.
There are parents who live vicariously through their kids, who want to be like their kids, want to be their kids' friends. Yeah. That's a phenomenon as well that exists. But even with that being said, wanting to be your kid's friend is about you. It's not to the benefit of your child. Your child doesn't want you to be their friend, right?
Right.
You're an authority figure. So you should not be your child's friend, because once you're like, we're friends, I can't tell you what to do. I have no authority over you. But as a parent, you're supposed to be in a position of authority. You have to tell them what to do. Get up and go to school, right? You have to be able to do that. But if you're constantly downgrading yourself as being someone who is equal to a child who doesn't know better, who can't see around the corner, whose brain isn't fully developed, and yet you want to be their friend and think that they can make all the decisions, the right decisions all the time, and they don't need you, you're fooling yourself. You're actually harming your child. And you're doing that for selfish reasons. You don't want to do the hard work of telling them no, of get up and go to school. Well, you know what? You don't have to go to school today. That's the easy road.
Yeah.
All right, fine. I'll stay at home. Easy. No argument. What? I want candy. They're not supposed to have candy, but you know what? Go ahead and have candy.
Yes.
Okay. And it gets to the point where I'm sure you've seen, like, especially back in the day when we had the talk shows like Sally Jesse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The parents who were like, you can drink and smoke weed in the house.
Yes.
Because you're safer at home than you are out there. Like,
Yes.
It's like, no, you're a bad parent. Like, even your child thinks to themselves, my parent doesn't love me enough to tell me no.
Yeah.
They know they're not supposed to be drinking and doing drugs. And my parents over here are like, I'll smoke with you. You're not cool. You're showing that you don't love them.
Yeah. You're not protecting them. You're not setting any boundaries for their own good.
No boundaries whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah. I have seen that. I have seen some parenting styles up close that I'm sort of decided that if God blesses us with a child in whatever way, there are some styles that I know I don't. And one of those is erring too much on the disciplinarian side or the authoritarian side, if you will. And one is erring too much on the libertine side and no boundary side. And how do you strike that healthy ground? And does it have implications for how you see the best way for us to be in the world in other ways, not just as a parent, but as a citizen, like as when deciding our political views, for example?
So when it came to my son, I leaned on teaching. So if he did mess up, I would check him. You messed up. I'll be honest with him. I think honesty is incredibly important. So I would be honest with him, but I would also teach him, like, you don't do that. Here's how you do it. And also expect for him to mess up and do it again and not take it personal. Like, oh, he's not listening. It's like, kids forget, right? And you're going to have to tell them 10 times. That is normal. It's not them disrespecting you. It's not them, oh, they don't want to listen. Kids forget. Their brain is still developing. Right. They get distracted by a loud noise and a toy and all types of stuff. They forgot, right? And you have to train them. You have to do things repetitiously. So I leaned on teaching him and giving him grace. And I think, especially as I've gotten older, and I'll even more so say coming to Christ, I've leaned heavily on giving people grace. Even with people I don't agree with, I purposefully withdraw myself and I don't argue with them. Um, Within the book, I talk about the importance of forgiveness. There's a solution chapter essentially saying, forgive your parents. If you were abandoned, forgive your parents. Because the forgiveness is not for them, it's for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's to release that anger, frustration, whatever you have going on so you can move forward in life. And I think sometimes people think that forgiveness means that you absolve them of everything that they did. I don't forget what my father did, clearly, right? But I'm not angry with him. Although he's not alive, I'm not holding on to some sort of anger or resentment. At most, disappointed. It would have been nice to have a happy, healthy father figure to mimic. But I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. So I tend to lean on giving people grace. Try to have good faith interactions with people, especially in political discussion. And apologizing if I get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was wrong. I'm not about like always being 100% right. Like I'm gonna say something wrong. I'm gonna try to fact check myself. I'm gonna do all those things. So yeah, I think grace is really important though. I think if more people gave other people grace and operated in good faith, that we'd have a much healthier political environment.
I completely agree. I try to give it, I'm going to make one caveat. I try to give it until someone gives me a reason to no longer give it.
Oh yeah. Then you
And
back away.
yeah, and then it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
But I like what you said about forgiveness there, and I've come to believe the same, that it's really about you not holding on to that poison pill.
Mm-hmm.
My pastor talks about it as like a debt that's forgiven. It's when there's a debt that's owed and you wipe it out, and you know, I think I've heard people that you and I both know some who have argued against, like, you know, forgiveness in some situations. And my whole thing is like, all I believe is that it's something to aim towards. It doesn't mean it's easy, and doesn't mean that you forgive people overnight just because you want to. I don't know if that's your experience. Is there anyone you haven't forgiven?
Personally,
Yeah.
no.
Wow. Okay.
No. I don't hold grudges or anything like that. Matter of fact, I don't really talk about it, but there was a point in my life where it was like a growth thing where even though you could easily say, well, this person was wrong about whatever, I felt guilty because I had a play in it too. So specifically, like one ex-girlfriend, I sent her out of nowhere because we had talked in a long time. I sent her an email apologizing for my part and not expecting her to write anything back. I said, I'm not trying to get back together with you. I just wanted to apologize. And as soon as I pressed send, I felt much better. Like I just got it off my chest. It took her a year to respond, which I thought was funny. I mean, she didn't have to. But, you know, I just wanted to let that go. I want to let go of that guilt and all of that. And also, in many ways, I was forgiving her too. Like we both had a play in the downfall of our relationship. So at that time, I had written to a few people and apologized.
You know, this is a very familiar to people like myself who've been through any kind of a AA or anything. Yeah. It's one of the steps.
I found that out afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense why it's one of the steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Letting those things go, those grudges, and finding our part in anything, even things that were done to us, which is kind of crazy. But I love hearing that. What do you think in this book? What's something in this book that might be controversial, especially to, I do have viewers who are on the left, some people who hate watch me, hello, but also I say that kind of jokingly, but also many people who are kind of like friends in real life who've told me they don't understand or they don't agree with me and are trying, I know they're watching some episodes trying to understand things better. What's something in the book that you think, if someone is in that leftist world, what you and I would probably call leftist, that they might find challenging or unusual or controversial?
Well, one thing I will say, it's not a political book
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a racial book. It is strictly from the perspective of a child, and it's being critical of behavior. So I specifically wrote it that way because I didn't want it to limit anything.
The audience.
Yeah, I didn't want to limit the audience. And personally, I know a lot of people within politics always run to policy, but my father wasn't there because he made choices not to be there, not because of, FDR or whoever from years ago and some
Right.
policy was put into play. Like, that's not why he wasn't there. He made choices, just like we all make choices. Does policy influence certain things? Yeah, sure. But I think sometimes people overplay policy in human behavior, especially when it comes to relationships, because relationships often are just, not often, most of the time are just emotional. It's not, well, you know what? That new policy came through. We're breaking up now. I'm not going to be in your kid's life. Like,
Thanks a lot, Obama.
yeah. So that's why I avoid all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm strictly talking about what we have control over. Every adult, every parent has control over how they raise their kids, how involved in their kids' lives they are. And so I specifically wanted to give the perspective of a child, because your child doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. They just want their parents involved in their life. So for those people who are on the left, there's no conservative view. There's none of that. This is just strictly about being a parent and being a child, and how to interact with them and raise them. But as far as controversial, I guess there are two things. I sort of talked about it before, spanking.
Mm.
I have a specific chapter talking about how we treat children. And many of times, so this is outside of spanking, but many of times I've seen, and I detail a story of watching a parent put their frustration, clearly it looks like frustration with the partner, into the child, right? And yelling at them and grabbing them. And when people read the book, they'll see that story and see what I'm talking about. I've seen that too many times, where they're talking to a child who can barely walk and yanking them and yelling at them because they're pissed off. I also talk about spanking because I do think that just because you were spanked doesn't mean that you have to spank your child. And just because you were spanked and I'm criticizing it doesn't mean I think your parents were terrible, they hated you, or anything like that. I get it. Some of it's generational. Some of it is just, well, their parents did it and so they did. Whatever. That's fine. For me as a parent, I always ask, is there a better way? That's simply it. Is there a better way to approach whatever it is?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, discipline, is there a better way than hitting a kid? And I think that there is. And I demonstrated with my own son, where he was young and I would pop him because I was popped, but I didn't like it. And I remember when I was a kid and I never liked it. Not because, no kid likes getting hit. So supposedly, although you talk to some people, they romanticize being hit by their parents.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like Stockholm syndrome, the way they talk about it. But not simply because I was hit, like I was being punished. It was because I already felt bad. And now you're hitting me.
Yeah.
And so it was just an unnecessary thing. And so the question is, what does hitting your child teach them? When I went on Chrissy Meira's podcast and I was talking about this, she brought up, when I was like, I think she said when she was like in her 20s, and one time her father raised his voice. And for a split second, she thought to herself, he's going to hit me. Like when she was a kid. Mm-hmm. And that's what he taught her. That when he raises his voice, some sort of physical assault is about to come. Not, you messed up and we're going to talk about it and don't do it again. You're punished. Or, you know what? You messed up, but we're going to talk about this. And maybe a punishment is not coming this time because this is a teachable moment. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to discipline, a lot of people only see the physical as the discipline, when discipline stems from discipleship, to teach.
Yes.
So that's why I say, what are you teaching your child by hitting them? Are you teaching them to fear you? Or are you teaching them some sort of lesson? Because you're hitting them because they messed up on something. So why are you hitting them? Does hitting them fix it? Or does it make them cry and they get out of your face and you feel better because you got your frustration out? Like, what are you teaching them?
Yeah.
You feel better, now they feel worse. And children are forgiving. So they just move on. But have you fixed anything? And trust and believe, lots of people get locked up and they've been hit their entire life. So it's not some foolproof method of hitting your child. And one last thing I would say is, one thing that annoys me is the mincing of words when it comes to spanking. Even me saying spanking, I don't like. You're hitting your child. And then they're like, well, if you do it in a measured way. Oh, okay. So when you're frustrated, how measured are you when it comes to hitting people?
Right.
Or, well, this is, discipline is loving and so on and so forth. If this was a woman saying, my boyfriend hits me because he loves me.
But it's measured.
It doesn't mean that hard, right? You're like, no, that's an abusive relationship. But if it's a child, someone who's a third of your size, who doesn't have a driver's license to drive away from you, who has no full rights, they can't go anywhere, and they're stuck there to deal with you whenever you get pissed off, when they screw up, that a belt is about to come, or you sadistically say, go get a weapon so I can hit you. Well, does that sound right when I break it down like that? So no, it doesn't sound right. And I, once again, especially with the spanking thing, that's the most pushback I've ever gotten. I wrote an article for Dad Save America, because I even wrote in the article, I know what the arguments are going to be. And I listed all of them in the comments. They went through every argument,
Well, thank you for that. You're giving me more to think about, because, I have been vehemently anti any kind of corporal punishment. Then I've also more recently had people reconsider it and pointing to scripture and spare the rod. And
can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. That particular, whether we're talking about hitting a kid or anything else, if you base your entire philosophy based on one line in scripture, you're probably doing it wrong. Because that entire portion is not about how you hit a kid, when you hit them. It's not about anything like that. All it's saying is you need to discipline your child. What does discipline mean? To teach. You need to teach your child. Why? Because they'll become an unruly child if you don't discipline them. They don't know what they don't know. So you have to teach them. And it's very frustrating for people to assume the rod is a physical tool to hit a child. On top of that,
that it's being literal.
Right? When the Bible all the time is figurative.
Yeah, a lot of it is.
Right? But in that moment, because it suits them. Why? Because their parents hit them. So my parents are godly people, so they can't be bad people. So that rod must be a physical rod that you're hitting a child with. So it's okay that my parents hit me. Right? This becomes this random justification using scripture. On top of that, as Christians, we have Jesus Christ as our model. What would Jesus do? Do we think that Jesus would be cool with us hitting children? And I seem to remember plenty of areas within the Bible where God is extremely pissed off when you hurt children. There's a special place in God's heart for children. So I find it very misguided when people use that one line. Every single Christian runs through that one line as their entire thesis for how they discipline a child. And so, no, I tend to believe that it's being figurative, and it's actually probably talking about something else. Some people say that it's talking about herding sheep. They have a rod where they guide the sheep.
Yes, I've heard this.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a possibility. But I think it's very clear that it's not literal. Right? There's all the time it talks about children being sheep, right? To guide. Like all these things are figurative.
Yeah.
So why do you want it to be literal? Why does hitting a child make it sound suitable? So I do think just in many cases people use the Bible to absolve themselves of what they're doing, what their parents have done to them, whatever action is about to happen. I have a friend who's a theologian. She says, Adam, I've heard of men, fathers, use the part of scripture where it says children must obey their parents as a justification to molest and rape their children.
Wow.
So you can use scripture for just about anything.
The devil can twist.
You can twist it in any which way to justify what you're doing. But once again, that portion of the Bible, which is in the Old Testament, that portion is old Jewish philosophy. And that entire thing is about disciplining children. It's not a romance to hitting kids. It's not any of that. You can go through it. It's talking about in the different ways why it's necessary to discipline a child. Mm-hmm. And the fact that people translate that into hitting kids, all because of that one line, sparing the rod, spoil the child, right? It's saying that spoiling a child is a bad thing. Mm. And the entire thing is about why you need to discipline kids because spoiling is bad. And here's what will happen if you don't discipline them. So that's my general diatribe when it comes to that one line being the entire thesis for someone and how they treat children. When we have an entire New Testament that gives us Jesus Christ in the conduct. And don't give me, he tossed over tables. Yes, Jesus got upset. Of course. Was he tossing over a table because of a child not listening to him? Of course not. So, he wasn't a hippie, right? He was a balanced man who did not sin. That is what you're supposed to be as a parent. You're supposed to be balanced with your children and not use physical harm, because there's no description of harming someone as a way to express love.
Right. I really appreciate you going in depth on that.
Yeah.
One more question about what might be possibly controversial. This is just something I assume based on your subject matter.
Yeah.
When I was on the left, there was this, or the leftist left. There was this sort of I would say a normalization of single motherhood.
Yeah.
That went beyond just saying, we're not going to treat people differently if they're raised by a single mom. We're going to acknowledge that single moms are carrying twice the burden, right? It went beyond that to almost lionizing single moms to the point that if someone were to make a fact-based, rational declaration that children on average do better with both biological parents in the home, on average. Mm-hmm. But it came to where you couldn't even say something like that without people thinking that you were making an attack on single moms or taking it somehow personally and getting emotional. And right. Have you experienced any of that kind of pushback of like, why are you putting out but you had a single mom who I assumed worked her butt off.
Yeah.
How could you do this and talk about the importance of fathers in the home, that kind of thing. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, but I don't really care.
Good answer. Moving on. Okay.
No, I do think that for many of those leftists who romanticize single parenthood clearly didn't grow up in a household where single parenthood was in play. There is nothing to romanticize about what my mother had to go through. We were homeless twice. We had to stay in a homeless shelter. One time, we were bouncing around in hotel rooms a different time. To watch her son being admitted into a mental hospital because he was struggling to cope, moving from state to state to get some sort of help from family. And that didn't really even work out. Having to do it all by herself. I was saying as I've gotten older, I've become more empathetic and give my mom more grace because I understand why she was high strung. Mm. She was stressed out. Everything was on her. She didn't have any help. So my mom is not a superwoman. She's a regular woman having to deal with whatever her circumstances are. And even my mother would say that is not an ideal position to be in because her life was hard to do these particular things. we turned out okay, right? We survived, but surviving is not the same thing as thriving. So when you have all these kids who are raised in single parent homes, and you say, well, look at him, look at Adam. Adam turned out fine. It's like, you don't know what I went through. Like, you don't know my struggle. You don't know my mother's struggle. Like, you have no idea what we went through to even end up here. So yeah, for many of these people, they're talking from some idealistic place because they didn't have to go through that. And in some cases, and I think what makes my circumstance different about actually talking about it is because a lot of kids who grow up in single parent homes feel exactly how I feel. They're just afraid to talk about it because it will get translated into, you don't appreciate your mother. Oh, you think your mom's a bad person. You know, it gets turned into some sort of personal attack on their family
mom or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And so they don't say anything because they love their mother, just like I love my mother. But the difference is that my mom will get over it. And she'll know, and because we've actually talked about this since the book has come out, I've explained to her, this isn't about resentment towards you. I don't resent you. I'm not angry at you. I love you very much. This is about helping other people who have gone through the same type of thing I've gone through. And I even said to her, like, you wouldn't tell someone to do what you did, right? She said, no. And that's the point. That's the point. Did we turn out fine at the end? Yes. But that's not optimal. And, you know, I'll be damned if we just say raising your kids in substandard levels is fine enough when the entire goal is to raise the kids to become the best possible people that they can become. So for me, as a very like analytical person, if you say that this is the optimal way of doing it, well, let's figure out how to do that. Or statistically, putting them in these circumstances increases physical abuse, sexual abuse, depression, suicidal ideation, all these different things. Substance abuse. The list goes on. You're at a higher risk factor because of these things. Well, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. Yeah. Like, does that sound right? Does that sound like a good parent? So, you know, damn your feelings about the choices that you want to make. What about the choices that benefit your kids? So, and one thing, because it has come up before, why didn't you do that, Adam? Why did you have your son out of wedlock? Because I was raised in a particular way where it wasn't emphasized. I'm a product of my environment. My mother never got married. Marriage wasn't necessarily emphasized. I thought I wanted to get married at some point, but I didn't move that way. And I was too insecure and had low self-esteem. So the first girl that liked me, you know, I just grabbed onto her. And so I wasn't thinking about the order of how you raise a child. I just had sex with a girl. She got pregnant. Oh, it didn't work out, right? The difference is I'm saying do not do what I did.
Exactly.
And I tell my son there is an order to things. So it's not I regret my son whatsoever. This is not optimal because I put my son at risk. So I'm telling my son, as a man, now he's 19, he's a man now, he's an adult. This is how you move forward. You get married first, then you have children. You focus on building yourself up. Do not chase women. Be a confident young man, and the women will follow. That's all you have to do. And these are things that I never heard, and I did it the opposite.
Yeah. I so appreciate that because I've been in that situation too as someone who had to learn some things the hard way, different conclusions. You know, it really resonated with me early in the conversation when you said you didn't grow up until your 30s. I smile because I have a similar, you know, it's kind of late.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you grew up late like that, you might be tempted to be like, wow, I wasted so much time. But I always try and give myself grace even and say, well, I could have been one of those people in my 80s who still hadn't grown up. So at least it happened at some point, right?
Exactly.
And so what you're talking about right now resonates with me as well. And I'm sure plenty of people watching, because if you have learned from your mistakes, if you did have to learn some things the hard way through the school of hard knocks, as my aunt calls it, if you were, like in my case, one of those kids who had to figure all the boundaries themselves or touch the hot stove and look to learn that it was hot kind of thing. Then when you try and talk about that later, or that there are all, just be prepared. Like, yes, I know exactly what you mean. There will be these detractors who say, but you didn't do that. And it's like, yeah, that's how I learned.
Yeah.
That's how I learned.
That's how I learned.
Yeah.
And that it was difficult for me. As much as the way I explain it, as much as I love my son and I was active in his life, I had my son every weekend. And that's good. You had him every weekend. But I'm always behind. See, my son needed me on Tuesday, not Friday afternoon picking him up. I'm always behind. How was your week? I'm always behind what has happened. Mm. And so, granted, 99% of the time it's not something detrimental, like, I went to the hospital or something crazy like that. But my son needs me. Like he needed me on Tuesday. Mm. And now he has to wait till Friday so we can have a bond and a connection about whatever he experienced, or him recalling whatever, or sometimes he forgot. Maybe something good happened on Wednesday and Thursday came and then Friday came and he forgot about it. Mm. And then by the time I bring him home, shoot, I meant to tell Dad about whatever happened. And it's because I'm not there. I'm not there every day. Like his mother is there every day for him. So you're always behind, even if you love your kids and you try to be as involved as you possibly can, you're always behind in that position.
What has been, out of all the things you've been working on the past few years and where your life has taken you, what's been one of your greatest blessings in the past few years?
I would say a couple. Getting baptized last year. Mm-hmm. Making a promise to God in front of my family, in front of my wife. That meant a lot to me. And having my son, I'm not sure if you read this book yet, but dedicating both of my books to my son. Mm-hmm. My son was part of the reason why I wrote the first book in the first place. Mm-hmm. Because I had an idea back in 2019 that I wanted to write a book, but I didn't know what to write about. And it wasn't until, COVID and George Floyd that I had an idea of what to write about. But all I expected was to write a book and give it to my son, and dedicate it to him. I just wanted something as a legacy for him to always remember his father. So I never anticipated doing any of this. I thought some friends and family might buy it. It'd just be another self-published book that's in the ether. And I would have been fine with that. Mm-hmm. I was perfectly fine with if, 20 other people outside of my friends and family bought it. But I wanted to write a book. I wanted to give it to my son. I wanted to dedicate it to him. And he told me he read the book and he said he understood what I went through a little bit more than what I had initially told him, growing up. But he also appreciated me more because he saw what he has I didn't have. And he's much farther along maturity-wise because I was there to help guide him and be there for him and talk to him and give him the shortcuts. And he can call me whenever he wants and ask me a question and he'll know I'll give him an honest answer. I didn't have that. Mm. And so he was more appreciative of that. Not to say he wasn't appreciative, but he understood more as a young man how impactful that is and how a lot of kids don't have that.
Do you know, my husband and I read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography last year, which is not that long and excellent. Did you know that he started that as a book for his son?
No, I didn't.
It was similar to yours. It was sort of like, which I think accounts for so much of the, it kind of feels like reading someone's journal because he's sort of laying out for his son the best way to live. Here's all the life lessons I've learned, son. Here's the best way to live. That's how it started anyway. Okay. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
That you were doing the same thing. Any final words that you want to leave us with, Adam? I don't want to keep you too long. And
no, I'm in no rush.
You're good.
I don't know. I there's a lot of stuff to talk about, so I don't know. What's my final words? I think sometimes parents underestimate how important they are to their kids. as they get older, they don't necessarily need you less, but they need you in different ways. That's the thing that I learned. So as he got older, especially like into his teenage years, I stepped back more, but I was waiting for certain moments to happen where I would interject.
Mm.
Because he doesn't need me to feed him. He doesn't need any of that stuff like he's a baby. But he does need me on his first heartbreak. He does need me when it comes to school and keep making sure he's good. And as he's gotten older, now it's a different way because he's an adult. He's 19. So I can't tell him what to do, but I can be here as a mentor, right? And I think that's the best way I can kind of explain it. Being a father to an adult is like a mentor position where you're kind of waiting for them to call you. And maybe you call them and ask how they're doing, and you ask like, "You want my 2 cents about this?"
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. But just being available for them. So it's like it's a different thing. But your kids always need you. So I think that's something that I learned, raising my son. And also I will say that, like what I was saying before, like as I got older, I understood my mother more, especially over the past 3 or so years. I've been more empathetic, less critical of my mother and how we were raised and certain things, because when you're constantly depressed and you're struggling, you always think about the bad stuff, but you ignore the good stuff.
Yeah.
The sacrifices. My mom took me to for my birthday to a surprise baseball game, and all my friends were there, and I had no idea. I was completely caught off guard. Like, those are great moments where my mom is thinking about me.
Yes.
And you forget all that stuff because of this negative thing that happened, or you're going through your own nonsense, and you forget how much your mom really cares about you and all the things that she did do for you. And there's no perfect parent that's out there. I'm not a perfect parent. I did the best that I could. I think my son's fine. I'm sure that there's something that I could have done more of, but I think every kid just wants to see that their parent cares. And if you care, you put in effort. That's all. And whether I messed up or not is a different story, but I always put in effort. I always tried my best. And I think most kids, 90+% of kids will appreciate that my parents actually tried.
I love that. Well, Adam, we're gonna read this book for a Deprogrammed book club. I hope we'll have some questions for you. Maybe we could get you to answer some of them when
Absolutely.
that happens. And you guys, please pick up a copy of the book. It's called The Children We Left Behind by Adam Coleman, and you can find it anywhere where books are sold online. It's Wrong Speak Publishing. It's its own publishing company. And
the audiobook.
And did you do the audiobook yourself?
Peter Feliciano, he did it.
Peter did it?
He did it.
Fantastic. Will you guys go pick it up? And all the links are below. And I appreciate you so much, man, for being here. And let me just say thank you also for helping me figure out my cameras. And next time I see you, who knows how long it'll be from now, we're going to be even further along. We'll walk in. You won't even have to set up your own camera. Thank you, Adam.
No problem. Thank you.